Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann. Today we're very lucky to be joined yet again by Joe Watkins. How you doing, Joe?
Hi, everyone.
I thought it's been a couple of weeks now, probably a month or so since we last had you on, and just thought we'd catch up and kind of see how things are going. And I mean, the first thing actually, pretty good to talk about, and it's quite topical at the moment, is PHP 7.1. How is all that going?
Yes, the first alpha is out.
Yeah, exciting stuff, man. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, and there's a few last-minute RFCs that might get in before the first beta, which will be feature freeze. So yeah, it's quite exciting at the moment.
Awesome. So do you mind to explain how it's gone? Because I know that you're working with someone else, aren't you? And you're leading essentially this release. Co-leading, yeah.
Yeah, with Davey Shafik. Yeah, that's we've only done one alpha, and it's still early days yet, but it went smoothly, relatively smoothly, because some PHP systems were down for a few days, so the announcement, it was a bit late and stuff, but we can't do much about that really. So.
That's good. So what kind of things have been added into this one then? Because I know last episode that we spoke, we discussed kind of quite a few of the RFCs. We almost had an RFC Showdown kind of thing where we were going through a lot of them, and which ones then have been agreed upon, and I know, and also how are yours going?
Oh, functional interfaces just fell flat on its face, and typed properties was going well, and then I withdrew it halfway through voting because some problems were found, and then I've put it back up for voting, but it's not going so well this time because people are scared away by the performance of it. When you write a micro benchmark, like when you write a test that's just set in one single test typed property or untyped property, you've only got 30 instructions there, and we've only added 5, but because there's only 30 instructions, it looks like a huge difference, and so it measures much differently. In real world code, it doesn't make any difference at all. Like in WordPress and things like that, it doesn't make any difference at all. So, but people have kind of lost sight of that, I think. And ideally, having type should mean we should be able to go faster, but no one's going to spend time on trying to optimize on a thing we might not get. That's a bit of a waste of time. But given the types, in principle, it should allow you to make optimizations that you can't otherwise make, or that are harder to otherwise make. So I think there is scope for improvement. And not to mention, accessing a property is faster than calling a getter by a big chunk. So that's what you should really compare it to, because if you've only got a getter and setter at the moment to enforce types, then you can just replace that with just a type property, and that will be much faster.
So when you say actually, performance improvement optimizations and things like that, you mean that they're with including these types, within the actual source code will allow us at a later date maybe to be able to kind of do optimizations on it. No, okay, this is really and stuff like that, and do specific things based on that.
Yeah, because So one example, obvious examples are using control flow graphs and type inference to set type-specific handlers for things like binary operations like add and subtract and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that you don't execute the normal handler, you execute a specialized one that's much faster if you know the types ahead of time. So that's an obvious one. But another one could be, when it comes to generating machine code, we don't really want to generate slots that are a zvals width, because that's twice the width of the largest data type in general. So that's a huge waste of memory when it comes to generating machine code. At the moment we swallow that because dynamic. So, but if we know the type ahead of time, and we know that nothing else is ever going to be written to that area of memory, then we don't need the whole Z val. We can just write the value directly, which seems appealing to me. But people have difficulty looking that far ahead, and
yeah, that's upsetting actually, isn't it? Because it does seem really like valuable. I mean, not only is documentation is enforcing types, on things, because as you say, I mean, it's the logical next step from being able to have parameter arguments.
It would actually be the first kind of type safety that PHP has, because I mean, on function boundaries, it's not really type safety. You can get a variable by reference of a certain type and change the type.
Yeah.
It's not type safety, in any real sense, except function boundaries. But I mean, that's not really useful. I mean, it is really useful, but it's not a complete set of tools, and a complete or a nearly complete set of tools within Grasp. It is a bit annoying that people have gone off it, but I mean, democracy, eh?
And how is, because there's a couple of other ones that we discussed, was like the annotation one. How's that going? Because that isn't actually been scheduled for release for the 7.1, is it? Is that still in discussion?
Okay, yeah, it's declined. Yeah, because people just can't agree. There's like 3 different camps who all want it to work in a different way, and each camp can't see how they're going to make it work if the other camp gets their way. Do you know what I mean? Like one like internals developers, we want AST really, because that's what we want to work with, because that's the nicest thing to work with. And people that write stuff that uses reflection today and things like that, the kind of inspectors and style enforcer things, that kind of thing.
Yep.
They want just arrays and something simple that's easy to use in userland, but they can't really make use of AST in userland. And then there's another camp who's not really sure but think both is a good idea and want us somehow to accommodate both with like INI switches or something like that. No one can really agree how it should work, so it's not going to work.
Because it looks like that it was like a 14 to 22 majority vote for no. Because I mean, obviously, because there was a lot of discussion, like what we spoke about last time, which was like to do with the fact of like design by contract. These things could be easily made with these attributes. Have you kind of thought about actually doing design by contract now in another way? Because I know one of the things that you did mention was a lot of the things that we were discussing and people were discussing how cool it would be to do this are now just going to be split out into their own RFCs because people will want those bits.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to do it another way, because the only other way really is to use dot comments, and that's really hacking.
Yeah, annotations.
I really don't like that. Not if you've got to pass it yourself, and you've got to come up with a way to store it efficiently, and it's too hard. For anything, I mean, it's fine, do it one script, that's fine. Do it for one library, that's fine. Do it for 5 million lines of code, no, definitely not. No one has the resources for that kind of thing. So that's why it needs to be built into the engine. But I'm not sure what best format to use, whether it should be strings or arrays or classes or AST or I'm not sure. It probably wouldn't be a problem if in the ideal world we had really good tools to convert from all them different formats, but we don't. It's really slow and cumbersome to convert from strings to code, and the same for all the other types, so I think it just won't happen at the moment.
Unfortunately, some people will like it, some people won't, and I was definitely in the camp that that would be a great addition, and to be able to be to do this would be so much power. How about things like the pipe operator? I know it's something we discussed quite a lot last time.
Oh, I think that hasn't really been moved forward. I'll just check, but I really don't think it has.
I've actually noticed another one that was released. Last month actually. It's simple annotations. Have you noticed simple? Have you looked at the simple annotations?
Oh yeah, I think I know that one. No, there's no patch for that. So this is one of them problems where you can see it's in draft. So he doesn't intend it to be discussed yet. But I dislike it when people put things up for discussion when there's not even a proof of concept. I think we've discussed it before.
Yeah, like how is it feasibly possible to do and things like that.
what kind of impact is it going to have? And it's not enough to say, oh, it shouldn't have any impact, because you can be wrong. You probably will be wrong. So yeah, I have read it. Yeah, it's been discussed a little bit.
I mean, how has it been like being like kind of dealing with it for the 7.1 release? Because I mean, obviously now you've got to look and you've got to decide what you're going in, kind of, and how the stability, the kind of things around that, and yeah, how's that experience been?
Well, I mean, I look at most stuff anyway, and it's true that release managers can influence what happens, and if it came down to it, we probably could stop something going in. But I mean, if something gets voted in, especially something with a supermajority, like a 2/3 majority, then it would kind of be dismantling the process to refuse to allow it, and it would have to be exceptional circumstances. But hopefully, we would be able to, just by talking, just stop things going to vote that aren't appropriate at this time. But I mean, everyone's got different ideas about what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. Recently, there was an RFC about changing a warning that's raised when you pass too few arguments to be an exception, and it's a backwards compatibility break, but it's a backwards compatibility break for really stupid code. But I mean, that's not really good enough reason to change it. But I mean, had this been noticed for 7, first thing to say is, had it been noticed, it would have been changed. Had it been flagged up as important before now, it would have been changed. Had it been flagged up earlier, it would have gone into a patch release or in 7. So, but it wasn't, and it hasn't. So it's been proposed and accepted for 7.1, and some people really hate that because it's a backwards compatibility break. But I think if we erect a wall saying you can't break anything at all, then we're gonna halt progress. And that would be extremely bad, because it's only like in the past like couple of years really, since they decided they needed to write NG, that performance has really got like a really
it's been a real focal point, hasn't it?
Yeah. And and that's all moving towards the goal of generating optimal machine code. But obviously the VM has to be optimal also, but it's towards the goal of being able to have a JOT that we can actually use.
And one way of doing that obviously is adding in your property properties types, because that will help a lot. But it will, but I mean the most of the problem is that to generate optimal code, it can't be stupid code, and it can't do really bizarre things. And it needs to be, obviously, as sparse as possible. So if you can eliminate some stupid check, or you can eliminate some weird state by slightly changing the behaviour of some edge case feature in quotes, I mean, then I don't see the problem. I don't see the problem in changing that, even in a minor release, because it's so close to the beginning of the 7 series that if we don't do this now, you're going to be tied into it, aren't you?
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was 10 years between 5 and its successor, so it's fair to assume that we're going to be stuck with these decisions for 10 years if we don't fix them now.
And sorry, what was it? What's the actual thing? So it's to do with the fact that if you provide at the moment too fewer arguments, it generates a warning, right, but it's just been converted to an exception. So it's no big deal. I mean, if you who uses warnings anyway? Doesn't everyone convert them to exceptions? Doesn't every major framework convert them to exceptions? I'm not really sure, but I should hope they do. Warnings are not useful, and it leads to an invalid state in the application. I'm not sure why you wouldn't. Yeah, and if you've used a type anyway, it doesn't matter. It's going to raise an error anyway. Yeah. And if you're writing PHP 7 code and not using types, then you're done. So I've got really little sympathy. I mean, if you've actually gone through the process of forcing everyone to, talking everyone into upgrading, and then not actually deployed the features, or not intending to deploy the features, then what are you doing? It's gonna raise an error anyway if you're using a type. So I don't really see it's a problem. It's going to be a different error. Like I say, it's so early on in this version that it's probably again what like the clock is ticking to when you can actually do something like this before people say no, it's set in stone now. What is this version?
I mean that'll come. It might even come during the 7.1 release. It maybe it should. I mean, I'm not saying that we should let everything through because it makes some improvement. I'm just saying that if the backwards compatibility break is breaking stupid code and code that's going to error anyway, or code that's not valid, then I find it hard to say no. You have to wait X number of years for that. All these little tiny improvements, it may seem insignificant, but they all add up to an efficient virtual machine, which enables us to have efficient machine code.
I mean, obviously now you say there's a lot of discussion around performance, and since the NG branch, then was that obviously spurned this on, that we're looking at performance, and do you have a lot of talks with people around performance now? Or is it just kind of still in the back of your mind that you realise 7 is for performance?
Well, I mean, it's in the forefront of my mind because all of these, lots of little RFCs have come forward, and they seem insignificant, and they seem maybe like to everyone like they're. Because in the RFC, you don't have to explain what it allows. You just have to explain, as a matter of fact, what is this change and what is it going to affect. But you don't have to explain the reason behind it. So a lot of these things that are just fixing little inconsistencies, they're actually because while Dimitri was working on performance, or while Nikita was working on performance, he discovered that this optimization or that optimization wasn't possible because of the state that the application gets in. So they put up an RFC and they fix the behaviour, and that takes them at least 3 weeks. And it's taking a big chunk of their time. I'm not willing to say no, you can't have any more. We can't have any more of this. It's extremely productive to do that. So I'm not going to be the one to stand in their way. So it's probably just going to. I mean, it will have to stop. But at the moment, we're on Alpha 1 and 7.1, and it's like, well, I don't want to.
There's still room. There is still wiggle room, isn't there, to actually do these things? I
mean, following Semver is very fine for your PHP project. It's very fine for your project in whatever language with an audience of anything reasonable. But PHP hasn't got a reasonable audience. It's got an audience of the entire world, and it doesn't have a release cycle that can accommodate strictly following Semver, where if you change the API, or if you change, if it's not backwards compatible, you change major version. I mean, we would have no minor versions and no patch versions. Because fixing bugs sometimes necessitates a backwards compatibility break. So if you're going to say we can't have any backwards compatibility breaks, then we can't fix any bugs. It's that simple. So it's not obtainable. It's not a standard. It's obviously a good standard in general, but for PHP it just does not fit. There's no way to make it fit and move forward at a decent pace with decent progress.
No, absolutely. I mean, you haven't actually employed Semver at all either. So you're not entitled. You don't have any kind of like.
We do have a guarantee that we'll retain backwards compatibility, and we do a very good job of that. But I mean, there was releases in the 7 series that broke compatibility for some people, like some well-known projects. So it's never been the case that we don't allow any breaks at all. That's never been the case, because we wouldn't be able to move forward. In every case, if a vote's allowed to go ahead, then it's the vote that decides what goes ahead. And if people have got backwards compatibility concerns, they'll vote no on it at that time, and then it will come back up later on, and we'll vote whatever way on it. So these things are decided by the vote, and it has been decided, so it's going to go in. No one wants to rip up the trust people have got in voting. Not everyone finds discussing things on the mailing list to be a good use of time. They won't do it. But when it comes to voting, a lot of people do. A lot of people take that a bit more seriously, and they will actually, because they know it's going to be counted, and they're going to actually be listened to. People do tend to do that. I mean, more voters vote on everything than get involved in every discussion thread by a long way. So that's why I say that.
And how do you feel about that then? Do you feel that it's fine, like, you know, some people just kind of coming in at the end and saying, or they look from afar as opposed to kind of help guide? Because I suppose the thing is some people could help guide more so, or maybe though people do, you know, the people that can help guide, like, say an RFC from something that maybe they feel at the beginning they don't agree with to something that they will like, as opposed to just saying, no, I don't like it, no, and then that's it, as opposed to helping.
Well, there's all kinds. I mean, I can't really say how other people work. I can just observe that, you know, even on the most busy threads, you know, there might be, like, the very busiest, like Scalar type hints or something, there might be 50 correspondents, but there was 140 votes. So more people vote than talk in every case. I can't really say why. I mean, I don't get involved in every conversation because there's not always something to say.
Yeah, so maybe in the case, you know, someone's actually just said exactly what you were going to say, or you may not have an opinion on it.
Yeah, a lot of the time, by the time I get to read something, someone more experienced than myself or better than myself has already answered. And like you say, I agree with them, or I would have said something like they have said, given a bit more time to think about it. So I don't always talk, and certainly you should try never to read something and then reply straight away, because that's when you make mistakes and you waste everyone's time and annoy everyone. So I don't know why more people vote than get involved in the discussion. I suppose part of the reason is not everyone voting could actually do as you said and guide. Yeah,
that's it. They haven't. Yeah, they probably haven't got the experience to actually help, you know, in that.
Or the interest or time or whatever.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I mean, not everyone's willing or capable of doing that. So that's probably part of the reason. But otherwise, I mean, mailing lists are not great to use. They're not like it's not like Facebook where you kind of look forward to looking at Facebook or Twitter. It's like a nice like interface, isn't it? Nice place to be.
Yeah, they're not made for user interface. Like,
no, deep in your Gmail inbox or whatever is not a very nice place to be. So that may be part of it as well.
How about like union types and things like that? Like, because I know those were things we discussed.
I'm hoping going to go to vote in the next couple of days. I think it is
because you've got union types and then you've also got
the intersection one.
That's it, yeah. You've got union types and intersection types. And, I mean, they're obviously split out into different RFCs, but they really are kind of one of the same thing where they're providing that functionality.
Well, I think union types is going to go ahead, first. And I'm not even sure if intersection types is going to go ahead. There wasn't so much talk about that.
That's interesting. Why one over the other? I suppose, is it because of the array discussion we had?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I think, to be honest, I might have done it in the same RFC because, like you said, it's one thing. It's multiple types, and I might have framed it like that rather than these two separate complicated things. But I don't know how it's going to go. I don't even know if I'm going to vote for that because I don't really know if I like it.
Do you feel that's going to go into PHP your 7.1, or do you feel that at the moment, because I mean, I suppose it's still
alpha. If it gets accepted, it will go into 7.1. Yeah, well, if it gets accepted in the next couple of weeks, it will go into 7.1. Yeah, I said last time that the cut-off date was going to have to be like the next day or something, but no, I was wrong about that. No, the cut-off date is beta 1. Apparently, alpha 1 is too early.
So how many versions, like, I mean, I suppose you do as many alphas as you see fit then, I'm guessing, until you find that it is ready for the stamp of beta 1.
Well, there is a schedule. We do 2 alphas and then 3 betas, and then basically from August to November do an RC every 2 weeks. And hopefully by like the beginning of November we should not be finding further bugs, and that will probably get the next tag will be the GA.
That's cool though. That's really cool. I mean, what else have you been up to then? Because I suppose this is probably, I mean, obviously work, but what else have you been able to do other than just kind of work and then RFC stuff? Because I'm guessing this has taken up most of your time trying to handle this.
Oh, well, no, it doesn't really take up a lot of time. No more time than it did, really. I suppose a little bit more time, but no, it doesn't really take up like every day, all day. A couple of days a month while you're doing releases, really. Other things that I've been doing, I can't even remember.
Well, I've actually, I mean, looking on your GitHub, actually, I noticed a memorize.
Oh, what have I been doing on GitHub?
I noticed that you did some memorize, a little memorize.
Oh yeah, that's a kind of a playground thing. I'm just playing with it, really. Well, the idea of it.
Is that something you're thinking, and hopefully for the core, or are you thinking that that's just something that you want to play around with, just as a?
No, it's not even something that I would really want people to use. Okay, so caching is intended to make code faster, obviously, but the problem is that there are many problems with caching, but one of the problems is when applications get extremely very large, and I mean very, very large. The cognitive overhead of reading a method that uses caching is high because it changes the control flow of the method, first of all, and it introduces like weirdness, and it means that if you want to extend that method, you have to know about the body of the method. You have to know how to replicate the caching that was done in the parent. So, or you have to call the parent. That's not always, how it needs to work. So, the idea is that you put in doc comments, the tag memorize, and then an optional TTL, and the engine intercepts calls to the function or method and fetches the result from the cache if it was called before. And this is shared between all processes, obviously. This is built on an APCU. Did I mention that? It's built on APCU, so it's shared between all processes. So if you've got an extremely large amount of nodes or processes, which a lot of people do, then that adds up to a huge boost right when you need it, when you're warming up a cold process. So that's one thing, and obviously, well, not obviously, maybe, I don't know, but these can be inherited. It's inherited like any other attribute of the method is. So that's a huge advantage. I mean,
that's interesting because in the examples you show just simple plain old functions. So this works with class methods as well, then.
Oh yeah.
And as you're saying, then, let's say we've got a case where I have a parent class that has an expensive method, and then in a subclass, I then essentially replace that method. Like I say, okay, now do this. Now call parent as well and do something else. So the memorization will occur on that parent invocation, or will it occur on the whole method?
Oh yeah, no, on the child.
So it trickles down to the child. So it's not just like, say, the snapshot or whatever I'm calling parent, whatever that. It's the whole method will itself as well be memorized.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, these kind of things like memorization and things like that are really powerful, aren't they? But you have to obviously make sure that, essentially it's working on or based on the fact that your function or your call is referentially transparent, where essentially all the parameters that you pass it, doing that call will return that output. So you can it's intended for deterministic code. Yeah, that's it, yeah. And doing side effects and things, obviously that won't help because you will only do it that once, and then it will decide that it's cached now. So no, it's interesting. I mean, this kind of thing, like looking at the caching stuff, because I know there's a PSR, isn't there, out for caching. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I super hate it. That's all of my thoughts on it.
So what's your kind of opinion there, other than hating it, obviously?
Oh, you can't make a standard around that. You can't. Already, right? That's only just been forced through, and already one of the authors of it is proposing another one. Now, what is the use in having two standards? That doesn't make any sense. When you're called the interoperability group and the standards don't interoperate, then you're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
Do you know exactly why they want to do another one then?
Yes, because the first one's really complicated and it doesn't cover all use cases. So they've thought, oh, well, this one won't work, so let's make a simple one that only covers a few use cases. This is impossible. You cannot make a caching standard because it's not a topic. It's not like HTTP where there's one protocol and one way to do it and one way to response it's not like that. there's a million different storage mechanisms, and it's not the typical case where you can, abstract it with an interface, because all of these mechanisms have vastly different uses, and they have different features, and they themselves have vastly different interfaces for good reasons, because they do different things. You can't make a standard around that. It's too complicated, and it doesn't do any favors. If there's more than one standard, then you're doing harm. So no, I hate that, and I hate the idea of a second standard as well. I hope people just ignore it. I know they're not ignoring it, but I hope they do.
And this is coming from experience, because obviously you're doing a lot of stuff dealing with caching. Like, you're handling obviously the APCU, extension and things like that. So yeah, you've had a lot of experience with this kind of work.
Well, I mean, just common sense can tell you that if you've ever used caching, it's not the kind of thing where you have to use the right cache first of all. You have to use the cache correctly. I mean, you can stick almost any caching anywhere and get better performance probably, but putting the right cache in the right place, doing the right thing, this is complicated. It's not simple, but a thing that you can just make an interface for. It's not. It doesn't work. So it won't work. I mean, it'll probably work technically, but I mean, I would never do that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Because obviously with the PSR, like the fig and everything like that, does like a lot of the core keep in contact with the fig, or?
No, it's supposed to be about frameworks.
Yeah. So it's nothing that you kind of chime in on and everything.
No.
It's on the higher level, as opposed to your stuff, which you're dealing with the actual language. This is
I mean, anyone's free to get involved in the discussion, but I see other people doing that, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
People that are respected in that community, and it doesn't work. So. No, I don't think that's really worth it. If they're gonna vote PSRs in that are harmful, then that's what they're gonna do. They'll make a bad name for themselves.
Because I mean, this is the thing with caching is one of the it's a very hard thing, a really really hard thing, and yeah, trying to almost distill a cache down to an interface is an incredibly hard thing to do.
I think it's difficult for cases like HTTP. I think that's really difficult. I don't actually think they've got it completely right. But I think it's doable in principle, but it's not the same. You can't apply the same, because it's of a kind of comparable complexity. You can't say, oh, well, if we can do it for this really complex case, then we can do it for that really complex case. And they've already found out that they can't.
And then they're having to have different standards, and then it's just going to get more confusing, because you're going to have two different things. Like, oh, you're using that. I mean, I'm guessing they're not compatible with each other because of. But yeah.
I mean, they might be in some superficial way, but no, there's no actual compatibility between them. No interoperability.
The fun times, eh? The fun times. But I mean, obviously, your stuff with the 7.1 stuff's going really well, which is good. Do you see kind of like a roadmap of what you feel is going to go in, like, in 7.1? Like, do you feel like there's a couple of bits that are like, I mean, providing obviously that they meet voting and things like that?
Well, I mean, on the cards in the last few days, or talked about in the last few days, there's been a nums, unions, iterable, as an alternative to
traversable and see, that's very interesting actually.
Yeah, it's like a traversable and array union.
Yeah, because obviously that was the discussion we had, where the nice thing about having intersections was you could have, unions was you could have that or that. So it was an array or a traversable.
And said, like, maybe the way is to try and solve all of these problems individually. And I'm still not sure what's the best way, even though someone's done it. I'm not sure. On the one hand, it's the iterable is really simple, but it only solves that one case. What if your idea of iterable is, you'll notice it's array and traversable, so that doesn't count standard objects. But you can for each over a standard object. So what does iterable mean? Why is an object in that union? And if it was in that union, would iterable really be useful? Maybe not. So yeah, it's more complicated than it seems, and I'm not sure what the answers are.
I mean, also with this kind of discussion and stuff, does it warrant? I mean, it's going to warrant more time, isn't it? I mean, you have got. I mean, what day? You said like it's November time then. That 7.1.
It's July the 7th.
July 7th. So it's not actually that long, and that's feature freeze.
That's feature free.
That's feature free. So, I mean, this could be discussion that's going to have to happen for the next release.
Well, discussion's got to be 2 weeks, and then voting's got to be at least a week. But I mean, really, it's a bit rude to hold a vote for a week. But I mean, that's the situation we're in now, because there's 3 weeks and 2 days. In the next 2 days, if you announce something in the next 2 days, you can just about get it in.
Whoa, and then pretty tightly as well. Oh man, that's really cool. And how have you been doing at work?
Well, I mean, Memorize is actually for work, because that's, I'd hate it if normal people, like, in their libraries and whatever use that. It would be too magical and I'd super hate it. But, I don't work in that kind of environment, and in the kind of environment I'm in, it's beneficial. So that's what I've been working on for work. And then I noticed, HHVM's got an implementation of it, and I was looking at, it's slightly different. I was looking at, sort of merging the two ideas, and yeah, I've just been working on that and some bugs and merging patches and things like that.
Because on your day-to-day job, is it primarily C that you're working in, or you go into PHP as well?
Yeah, it's mainly C.
So, and it's dealing like, because you obviously have quite a few custom extensions for the language, like for PHP.
Well, actually, the majority of them are open now. But yeah, I do write PHP, but I mean, the majority of the time, I don't. There's whole teams of people that can do that, and I'm the only one that can write C.
Yeah, so I think, you're lumped with that task.
Yeah.
And like, because have you been able to, I know that a while back actually we were speaking about it, like, have you been able to push 7.1 now, or 7 at least, sorry? So
we've deployed 7.
And that's going all right, everything's fine now, test suite's passing, because I know you had all the problems with UOPS and things like that.
Oh yeah, no, I broke UOPS to solve them, but yeah, no, we've deployed that now. We're on 7.07 or whatever the latest one is. Yeah, it's going alright. It was a bit rocky at first. There was a couple of bugs in PHP source that were in production that were crashing servers, which was a bit scary for a while. But we got over that. And yeah, now it's okay.
All right, man. Well, I think it's been another great episode. It's good. It's always great catching up with you, Joe, and like talking, about all these different things and the RFCs and how you're getting on with. Yeah, I mean, it must be really exciting. Your first ever, release, being able to get into that.
Yeah, it was good.
I mean, and actually, before you leave, with the process for doing that, then how do you package it up and everything like that? Is that all automated, or is that something manually processed you have to do?
Well, there's a script distributed with PHP called make dist. And that makes everyone's got it. That makes the release tables, and then you're using a specific process and security settings. You tag it on GitHub and upload it to PHP Mirror, and then it's all available online. But it's quite a complicated process, and there's the document they give you to read is not really the way it is. Because it was written years ago and things have changed, but no one's actually wanted to say this is how it's going to work now. So yeah, it's a bit confusing, but I think we're both getting the hang of it again. So yeah.
Awesome. All right then. Well, I'll leave you be, audience. We'll speak to you again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3devsandamamaybe.